Hi guys, today we are going to be doing something that I really don't think that any of you expected from me, and that is to be reviewing the Cosmos palette from Anastasia. How late am I with this? Probably a couple of months, but you know what? I have this palette. I have over the past couple of weeks, or should I say past couple of months. I don't even know how long this has been available. That's how long I feel like I've had this, but I've over that amount of time filmed 3 looks with this, and I'll be honest, I don't remember completely the looks that I've done. I did take a look at some of the pictures just to kind of like get an idea, but I don't remember all of the shades that I've used in this palette. But I thought that instead of scrapping those looks, you know, I might as well make a video out of it because there might still be some of you who are interested in this palette, and I feel like maybe I have something to offer in that I've actually used this palette quite a bit now and I do have a lot of thoughts on it. So that's basically what we're gonna do. So I'm gonna show you the 3 looks that I've done at the end of the video like I always do in these. And I'll start by showing you some swatches with this palette, and then we're gonna go ahead and do 1 look on camera. And I will say, when I first got this palette, I was super excited, and then I opened it for myself just to kind of look at it, and I went to swatch it just because I was so curious, and the darkest matte in this palette, called Dark Matter, swatched absolutely horribly. I was like, is this a dud? Like, does this shade just not work? Like, what is going on with this shade? Like, it is so dry, and it's almost like a little gritty, and it picks up on the finger, but it doesn't transfer to a swatch. So I was kind of like, I don't even know if I want to make a video with this, like this seems kind of weird, like, but then I was like, you know what, I bought this palette, I want to try it, I want to review it. So I started playing with it, and the weirdest thing is that it actually performed kind of good on the eyes, but I don't know if this is just something that's happened to my palette or if it's how the palette's supposed to be. I really don't know, but I'll show you. Like, I don't have anything on my finger right now, but swatching this, it feels kind of like dry and a little, like, not bumpy, but almost like there's like some sand particles in the shade, which is strange. But like, look how good it picks up on a finger like this, but then when you go to swatch it, it's like, huh? Like, do you see what I mean? Like, it just doesn't transfer at all. Like, it doesn't matter how hard I press, like, it just kind of like sticks in my finger. And that was what happened the first time I swatched it too, and I was so confused. But like I said before, I did use it in the first look that I filmed, which has now been quite some time. So I really want to test out that shade again just to make sure that I wasn't like making things up in my head and feeling like it performed better than it did, because the swatch of that shade is absolutely terrible. And I don't know why that is, but we're going to go ahead and try it again and just kind of see what happened. So I'm just going to prime my eyes with my Natasha Denona eyeshadow base like I always do. So I think mostly what I want to do today, I do feel like this palette is quite versatile despite being like mostly a neutral palette. Like, all of the mattes in this palette are quite neutral, but I do find that I've been able to do like pretty like different to each other kind of looks because there are so many different beautiful shimmers in this palette. And I have to admit, I am so far very impressed by pretty much every shade that I've tried in this, and I feel like every shade looks so much better on the eyes than it does when you just look at it in a pan or you swatch it. Like, it really does have something truly special to it. So I'm excited to play with this palette again and see what I can end up with. I am gonna try to make this different than the other looks that I've done, but like I said before, I don't remember exactly the shades that I have used. But what I do know is I really want to test out this shade because I don't think I've used this one yet. I want to do maybe like these 2 in my crease. I feel like I've used, I do want to use this one too though. Like, I feel like I've used the warm tones a little bit more than I've used sort of the cool tones. And we are going out for dinner today, like a little date night, so I want this to be just like a very pretty look. So maybe I'll do, see, I don't even know. I'm just going to start with this shade in my transition just so you can see what that one looks like, since it is the lightest shade in the palette. But like I already said, so far I've had a really good time with this, and I feel like even though there are a ton of neutral mattes in this palette, I feel like this is a way to do it right. Like, I feel like the mattes are all different enough that you can kind of warrant them being in the palette, and it doesn't seem too redundant. Like, they're all of different depths, they all have different undertones, and it kind of makes sense that they're in the palette. Whereas I feel like with a lot of palettes that I've, you know, been playing with lately, or just like palettes that have neutrals in them, like, some of the neutrals are just too similar. It's like, how am I gonna use 2 of these on the eyes and make them look different when they're almost exactly the same in the pan? And it just seems like a waste of space to have like so many shadows that are so similar to each other. But I do feel like they did a good job with the matte selection in this, and for me the matte selection in a palette is almost more important than the shimmer selection, because the mattes to me are how I build my look, and then the shimmers are just kind of like the icing on the cake. So I'm very impressed so far with this, and I'm excited honestly to be doing this look with it and see what I can come up with today. So I really like the pigmentation of this shadow. It's not like too dark on my skin tone at least, and it works really nicely as a transition shade to pretty much all of the other shades in here. I am gonna take some of this underneath my eye as well, just to have a little bit of a base. Should probably mention that these shades are very powdery. Like there's a lot of kick up in the pan with these. If that is something that bothers you, you might not like these, but I feel like a lot of ABH palettes have that. Now, I am not someone who has been like, you know, a massive fan of ABH over the years. I've tried some of their palettes, some I've liked, some I've been kind of like whatever about, and I feel like this is the first palette in a long time that I have looked at and been like, wow, that's actually a color story that I can see myself using, and the formulas have also been really good. So this is probably the favorite ABH palette that I have ever tried so far, but that could also be because I've definitely been a lot more into like more neutral and wearable. I really hate that term, but it's a good way to explain what I'm trying to say, and I think you guys know what I mean by that too. Then I have been in really ever, like I started my channel being just super into colorful makeup, and it was all that I wore. And just in the past like couple of years and stuff, I feel like I've come to appreciate neutrals a lot more. I'm not someone who does like super simple looks still, and I do prefer having some drama in my looks, but you know, I can mess with some neutral mattes, and I feel like having a neutral kind of base to a look is a fun way to like, you know, be able to pull in different things like lighters and stuff like that to make it more interesting. So I think what I'm going to do next is I'm going to take this shade. I'm just not sure how different these are, like how well you're going to be able to see how the shadow performs, but I feel like this is the one that's going to go the best and like make sense tone wise. So I'm going to use this as my deepening shade. This is a shade called Eclipse, and I'm just going to use that on my Rephr 13, and I'm just going to do a very basic crease here, because that is just kind of what I feel like doing today. So I'm just starting by packing this on in my outer corner and also blending it into my crease. I have not watched anyone else's review on this palette, so let me know if you have watched any other reviews and like what those reviews have been saying, because I'm super curious to know if other people have had the same problem with that shade that I did, because I feel like it could be like a batch problem. I can't imagine it being like just my palette, but I could also see like a lot of the palettes not having this issue. And it might not even be an issue. Like it might just be how that shadow is pressed and how it's supposed to be. Because like I did say, it performs nicely on the eyes from what I remember. So I don't know, it's just a very confusing shadow to me. I'm gonna keep the depth of this pretty much just on the outer corner of my eye, just so we can test out that silver shade to see how that performs. Or pink shade, I mean, not silver. I want to see if I'm able to pull out the sparkles in that, because it is one of those shades that it just didn't swatch that good, but I do feel like on the eyes with some kind of a glitter primer, it's probably going to perform a little bit better. I am going to take this shade underneath my eye as well, just so we can keep it the same all the way around here. Now I'm just going to take the tiniest amount of this black matter or dark matter shade, and we're just going to kind of see. I did find that using a natural hair brush worked a little bit better to pick up the shade, but I'm sure you could use a synthetic brush as well. I just want to see if I'm able to, yeah, see, I'm definitely able to get some depth with that. It's such a weird shadow, like I just don't understand the technology behind this. Like, just like, see, you can very much see a difference between these two eyes, and it's actually going on the eye like so nicely too. And now I'm just like even more baffled by this shade, because the way that it swatches versus the way it performs on the eyes, I've never seen anything like it. Like I've never seen a shadow swatch so poorly and still perform good on the eyes, but I'm not mad at it because it means the shade works, and the shade works is a good thing for me because it means I can use it. So I'm just gonna finish up with this shade, and then we're gonna do the shimmers, and I'm excited to test out some more of these that I haven't used yet. Like, you cannot tell me that this doesn't look good, because this looks amazing. I'm gonna put on some of my NYX glitter primer, which I always do with my shimmers, because I just find that it, I hair that just will not move. I just find that the shimmers, it really pulls out the sparkle in them, especially shadows that like have some sparkle but aren't like that sparkly. I don't know if that makes sense, but I feel like these kind of shimmers, the sparkles look okay if you like swatch them heavily, but put on the eye, sometimes the sparkles disappear if you don't have some kind of a tacky base down. So I'm gonna take the shade called Orion, which I don't think I've used yet, which is this one. I've used all of the special shimmers and they're so pretty. Like, they're indie makeup quality shimmers, and I really appreciate that from a mainstream brand. So we're gonna see what this shade is like. It picked up very nicely. Actually picked up way more than I was expecting. And I'm gonna pack that on quite heavily, and we're just gonna see like how sparkly I'm able to get this shade. So it almost like the sparkles are there, but they're distributed kind of unevenly. Like, I'm not sure how I feel about that. That's kind of weird. I'm just gonna kind of go in a little bit heavier with this. Yeah, I actually don't know if I like this shade because it's looking kind of weird. Like, there are sparkles in it, but like they're not everywhere. They've kind of just like decided where they want to be themselves, and they're like, okay, I'm gonna stick in this spot but not in this spot, and I kind of wanted them to stick everywhere. So yeah, this might not be my favorite shade in this palette, but I'm still like, you know, gonna be able to use it. Not sure if I'm loving that. I'll show you a close-up obviously in the end so you can see what I mean, but I don't feel like I have control over like where to put the sparkles in this. And also because I don't think I've used this shade, I'm gonna take some of this, which is the shade called Mercury, and I'm just gonna use that right in between like the dark matte and the shimmer, just to merge the two, and also just to make this look even more cool toned, since that's sort of what I'm going for today. This is definitely more of a like a satin type shade, which I don't mind that with it being this dark. I only really dislike satins if they're like super light, but as sort of a merging and blending shade, I think it's totally fine. It's actually a really pretty color, and it goes nicely with this pink as well. Yeah, I'm not mad at this look, but let me just zoom you in a little bit. Like, I just want you to see what I mean. I'm not sure if you can see that, but I feel like the sparkle particles are just kind of like very random. I don't know. I'm not sure I love how that looks, but I'm sure once I'm done with the look, can you even see that? I hope you can see that, but I feel like once I'm done with the look, you're not really going to be able to tell at all that is like not perfect. So I think I'm probably just going to go ahead and put on some lashes and finish off with this look, and then I'll come back and show you the other looks that I've done as well, because I've actually really enjoyed the looks that I've done with this palette, and I feel like I said before, they're all very, very different. So yeah, I'll be right back. Alright, so this is the look all done with lashes. These are from Unicorn Cosmetics. I don't actually know which lashes these are. I think they're the Dreamer lashes, but could be mistaken because they were not in their box. So, let me just start off by showing the other looks I've done with this palette as well, because I feel like I have a lot of thoughts and I want to make sure I get them all out here. So, yeah, like I was saying in the beginning of the video, I do think that the color story of this palette is really, really nice, and I think they did a good job making sure that the mattes and the shimmers in here are very user-friendly, they're easy to like pair together, and that the tones in here make sense with the mattes and the shimmers. And I think that this is probably one of the best ABH palettes color story-wise that I have seen. But again, it could be personal preference. I think that the mattes in here are absolutely amazing. They are very just blendable, but also pigmented and buildable at the same time. I wouldn't say they're like the smoothest matte formula. They're definitely on the dry side. They do have a lot of kick up, but they perform beautifully on the eyes. I haven't had any problems at all with fallout despite them being very powdery. Maybe just make sure you go in kind of, you know, lightly tap off your brush if it's something that you're worried about. But even though I go in very heavy with my brushes and my shadows, I didn't have any fallout. So I think that you're going to be safe for the most part, unless you're just very reckless and you go in very heavy. But I think that these perform really, really well. The only shade that I'm a little iffy about is the dark shade, which is called Dark Matter, which I showed you the swatch of in the beginning, and I just swatched so badly, but it performs well on the eyes. So like, I can't really hate on it because it still does what it's supposed to do, you know. But there is something about like that experience of swatching it that makes you go, I don't know if I like this shade, even if it like does the job on the eyes. I don't know if that's making any sense, but for me, parts of like, you know, the whole eyeshadow experience is also like, how do they swatch and how do they feel? And these don't feel that good, but they still perform great on the eyes, which at the end of the day is all that matters. Let's talk about the shimmers. Now, there are 3 of those kind of like sparkly iridescent sort of shimmers. It's the shades Super Cluster, Quasar, and Supernova. These are absolutely stunning. These are so pretty. These are the kind of formulas that I've been so obsessed with lately. They're that kind of sheer but like wet looking, still has some color to it kind of formula that layers so nicely over mattes. They can be worn on their own. They can be worn as like, you know, inner corner highlights or brow bone highlights, and they really just add something to a look that I think is just so pretty. There's also a couple of other shimmer formulas in here. We have kind of 2 that are the same. It's the shades Sun and Mercury. These are more of that satiny kind of formula while still being kind of metallic, but not really. They're not like super in your face, but they still look nice and they have a subtle sheen to them. There's a shade called Galaxy, which is that kind of dark matte with glitters in them, like hard to explain, but I did feel like when I used it in the first look, the glitters actually showed up on the eyes despite it being a matte with glitters. And for the most part, those shades don't show up on the eyes, so I was pretty impressed with it, but it's also not the kind of shade that I can see myself using very often. I also did not have any fallout with that shade, which is great. A lot of the shades that have that kind of formula in them tend to have some fallout, but this one did not. So I think overall, like, those are my thoughts when it comes to this. Like, there are some shades in here that I probably will not be using that often, but I think for me, having those 3 special shades together with the range of mattes in here is what makes this palette for me. Like, those are the shades that I can see myself actually reaching for over and over. I can actually see myself bringing this palette as a travel palette because it does have those really pretty shades that I can see myself using on more of like a daily basis. So I really do like this palette, even though, like I said, there are a couple of shades that aren't my favorites, especially like this pink on the eye, which is kind of weird. Like, it is kind of weird, I'm not gonna lie. That is probably my least favorite shade in this palette. I did put a little bit of my Noctilucent palette, the highlighting palette, in my inner corner, and I also used the pink shade here on my face and my brow bone just because I wanted to like tie it all together. So I used it a little bit just like right here and right here and here. But overall, I really like this palette. I'm not mad that I picked it up at all, and I think that if you bought this palette, you probably like it, and I think if you're still interested in this palette, I think you're going to like it. Those are going to be my thoughts. Let me know if you picked it up and how you feel about this palette. I would love to hear like other people's opinions about this palette, especially now that it's been around for a while and I feel like people have had enough time to like make up their minds about this. So yeah, let me know. I would say if you want to see more ABH content, I'll put a playlist on the screen, but honestly, I don't really have a lot of ABH content, and the stuff that I have reviewed from ABH have been really old videos and you probably don't want to watch those, so I'll just put another video up on the screen that you might enjoy. Also, if you're new, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.